Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sherry, your host, also known as Bear's Mum. In this week's episode, we're talking to Diana Scott from Frontier Pets. Di is the OG of raw pet feeding in Australia. Her brand Frontier has been around going on 11 years now and is still going strong. So we're going to be talking about how she got started, how she chooses her ingredients, what freeze drying technology actually is, and what that means for you as dog mums, and having a little bit of a chat about packaging and all the fun things. Stick around. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Our guest for this week is the lovely Di from Frontier Pets. This lady is a little bit of a legend in the pet space in Australia and the raw feeding space in particular. She's the OG, I reckon. You would have to have been one of the first to do the sort of product that you have, yes? There wasn't very many when you
Absolutely.
started.
No. And in a lot of ways, we were quite innovative. So it wasn't just, the ethical side of our product, which I'm sure we'll talk about. It's the direct to consumer selling component of the product as well, which was when we launched 10 years ago, that was very disruptive. It was very different to the traditional model of developing a product and then selling it through traditional bricks and mortar. So, yeah, we were very much a leader in the space at the beginning.
Well, and still are, I'd argue.
I'd like to think so, Sherry. Well, certainly in the sense that we're the only product in the world actually that uses only free range and organic produce in our food.
I love that.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you would because of your background and the your love of organic products. Yeah, it's quite different to when people talk about like grass-fed beef, for example. People will talk about grass-fed and how wonderful it is. In fact, grass-fed beef get finished in a feedlot. They spend their last 200 days in a feedlot. So it's not as ethical as people make it out to be. So when we talk about our produce, which is free range for whole of life, that is very different to everybody else's product. And I haven't come across a product in the world that does that. So, yeah,
No,
in
I
terms
haven't
of
seen one either. No,
no,
and it's not easy either. I mean, in a matter of weeks, we'll be able to say that we're 100% organic ingredients, but it's been a 6-year journey to get there. It's not easy, is it?
no, it isn't. And in a sense, I mean, it's obviously not easier for the farmers either, but in our space, in a pet space, it is challenging. Oh, that's what I originally found, Sherry, that it was very challenging because the farmers that I spoke to, and I did actually visit them, I actually packed up my kit and did a road trip around the eastern states and spoke to farmers. So we use free range eggs, pork, beef, chicken, wild caught fish. And you talk to them and say you want to use this produce for pet food. And that's where I experienced roadblocks. Not necessarily because the farmer didn't want to participate and didn't want to work with me, but that it
So
had
different
not
then.
been done. Yeah, God, I remember. In fact, not far from you, up in Shepparton, I dealt with a free range egg farmer up there, and they were quite large because we use quite a bit of egg in our food, and they were quite large. And the founder of that particular company, when I said I want to use your eggs for free range, it was only dog food at the time. We do cat food now, but I want to use your eggs for free range dog food. And he just yelled across the warehouse floor to some other dude. He said, "Can you believe this chick? She wants to use our free range eggs in pet food." And I think there was this, like, not disbelief, but like, what? Really? And yeah, that was, that was convincing them that it was worthwhile. And it has been for us. It's been, and we've spent close to $12 million now on organic and free range produce. So, we've come a long way, but at the beginning it's very difficult when you're a fledgling brand, that no one's heard of, blah, blah, blah. So, but very worthwhile when you actually get there.
Absolutely. So what was it originally that inspired you to start this journey?
I have always fed, or for as long as I can remember, I have always purchased and fed my family free range produce. I have an extreme dislike for intensive farming. It's so cruel. It's so unnecessary. We could go on forever about it. So I make personal choices. I support advocacy groups in ending the whole the whole intensive farming situation. And what happened, Sherry, really, it was literally in 2014. I remember because I had a conversation with my resident vet the other day. If I look at labels, I look at all labels. I want to know where my product comes from. I want to know if it's organic or free range where possible, the provenance, if it's Australian, etc. And I had never done that with my pet food. I just didn't make that giant mental leap. And what happened is that I was feeding, I've always got two dogs. The two dogs I had at the time, I was feeding kibble, as most people do. And for the first time, I looked at the pack and I looked at the label and I thought, I don't know what this is. I don't know, the hierarchy of ingredients. Is the first ingredient the most prominent? And if it is, the first ingredients in a lot of pet food is wheat and, grain-based. And, where was it made? It went on and on. And I thought, oh, this is insane. I've not made the same choices for my pets as I do for myself. So that's when I started on the journey, Sherry. That was when I was Googling, where can I find a product that's made out of free-range ingredients? Just didn't exist, just did not exist. And the more I got into it, the more I realised how much meat. I mean, I know that a lot of dog food contains grain, but it contains meat meal as well, usually. So when you actually add up the fact that we've got, in Australia alone, there's 6 million dogs and nearly 5 million cats, and that's just in Australia. Globally, there's almost 1 billion companion animals. If you consider how much they're all eating in terms of protein, they're actually consuming intensively farmed animals. And so it's a big problem. They're actually part of the problem. And I actually discovered Dr. Kathy Cornack, who's our resident vet and a new animal nutritionist. And I said, what should I do? And she said, there's nothing around. You have to make it yourself. And raw feeding is best. And then I started to do that. And I tell you, after the second weekend of portion controlling meat and offal and eggs and fruit and vegetables, I kind of lost the will to live. There's got to be a better way than this. And it was my desire. It was a personal desire to have an ethical pet, like a truly ethically sourced ingredient pet food, and not being able to find one, and then wanting a raw food that was easy to prepare and to use, and discovering freeze drying. That it was like worlds collided. Mm. It was fulfilling a personal need, and then it ended up being a lot bigger than that. It grew so quickly. It was extraordinary growth. The first few years it was amazing. I mean, we're still growing now, but the first few years were amazing. And I think that shows that need resonated with other people. They want ethical produce. They want to be able to feed their pets raw because they know that's best. But there's challenges with home preparation for raw food, and it's time consuming. And here we now have Frontier Pets, which is 100% ethical all the time, and it's freeze-dried, so it's ultra convenient. It just kind of ticked all those boxes.
Absolutely. So just for our listeners and our viewers that aren't familiar with freeze-dried, do you want to just do a very quick explanation of what it is and what it means, basically?
Yeah. I discovered freeze drying when I was on a trip to New Zealand, and I saw a freeze dried pet food there, and I started to look into it. It's quite challenging technology, but it's quite simple in its use. So our freeze dryers are about the size of a shipping container. And what happens, they're $1 million each. Then they're very expensive. Yeah. So what happens is, for us, we mix all of our ingredients together. So we've got our meat and our eggs and our fruit and vegetables, and we mix it all together like the same way as you would make a spag bowl. And we put it in a machine and grind it all. Of course, it comes out like the little tubes that you would get that you see for mince. What the freeze dryer does is it freezes the food, the raw food. So that's its first process. It freezes it. And then it goes through a process called sublimation, which is heat and air pressure. And what that does is it converts the ice crystals to vapor. So it extracts water, but it does it from ice crystals. So it's literally taking the water and only the water out of the food. So what you end up with is a completely dry, light product. And it's self-preserved because the thing that makes food go off is water activity. That's what bacteria live in. So we've got this raw mince product, and the freeze dryer goes whoop, and it takes out all the water, so you end up with a dry product. But all of the nutrition and the calorific content remains completely intact because all you've done is taken out the water. So, I mean, it does get, there's water-soluble vitamin minerals that come out that you replace. But basically, that's it. So you've literally taken the water out. It weighs 75% less because we're all made up of 75% water. So you take the water out, you end up with, so if you've got a kilo and you take the water out, you end up with 250 grams. And then what happens is the customer then gets the food, keep it in your cupboard, no need for freezing, any of that stuff. Completely shelf stable, will last for 20 years without going off. And then when you put it in the bowl, the pet parent just literally puts warm water back into it. So it reconstitutes it to its original raw form. So it's not cooked, it's completely raw. And as soon as you add the water, you get this aroma of food exactly the same way as if you were feeding raw. And the best way I can describe it is if you put a grape into a dehydrator, you would get a sultana. It uses heat, pulls it out, it goes, eat, and it shrinks up. You put a grape into a freeze dryer, you get a dry grape. So everything remains, the size, everything remains the same. It's just not got the water in. So it's great for all sorts of things. It's lighter, a kilo of our food reconstitutes to 4 kilos. So, but you've only got to carry a kilo around with you. So, a lot of women are the ones that buy their pet food. So when you buy 4 kilos of our food, you've got 12 kilos of food. So you're not lugging around 12 kilos of food. You keep it in your cupboard. It's as fresh as a daisy. Where as soon as you add the water, you release all the aromas of the food in its original raw form. So the dogs go nuts. And the cats now go nuts. It takes 20 seconds. So it's not like you've got to keep it out for half an hour or something. So it's very clever technology. There's freeze-dried coffee, your 2-minute noodles, where you get your little vegetables in there in that little packet. They're all freeze-dried. So, if you've got a packet of freeze-dried peas and you put it in a bowl and you add hot water to it, you get peas exactly like they were when they were freeze-dried. So I hope that explains it in a simple way.
Absolutely. It's such a good idea. I mean, besides obviously locking in the nutritional benefits, it's just so easy to store. It's easy when you're traveling. If you've got a dog that, for whatever reason can't have raw or doesn't find raw palatable, you can just pop it in a skillet or what have you and just very lightly cook it. And it's just as nutritious as if you were cooking fresh, straight from the shop.
Yeah, exactly. But it's pretty rare to find a dog that doesn't like it because as soon as you add the water to it, so I add hot water to it because as soon as it gets in the bowl, it cools down, and so the pet's getting a warm, fresh meal every single time.
Exactly. And that makes a big difference because it's like it's fresh out of the oven virtually when it's got that warmth to it.
It's amazing. I think it just smells fantastic. It's just, and my dogs have obviously been on it for 10 years and they still hang around. They still go, this is great. And, from our point of view, we've got pork, chicken, beef and fish and lamb, and it's all ethically, it's 100% free range. So the nutritional value of the food is superior as well. I mean, a free range egg has 4 times more vitamin D than a cage egg does. So you've got that extraordinary quality of ingredients to start with. I'm not surprised now, of course, with hindsight looking back, that it took off so well, because, gosh, what a fantastic idea. You don't have to take something out of the freezer and wait for it to defrost and know that it's got all of those
Exactly.
preservatives and things in it, which they have to put in because it's, because it's got so much water in it. So yeah, it is. It's very, makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, all of your produce, as in your fruits and veggies, they're organically grown as well, yes?
Absolutely, 100% certified organic fruit and veg. So we use that there's 5 fruit and veg in our food, and it makes up 10% of the total. We use the staples like sweet potato and broccoli and so on, and carrots and apples, and sometimes we might change that with the season. But basically, they're the kind of the staple ingredients, and they have their own benefits because, we've got a tiny bit in the cat food, not much, because cats are carnivores. That's what they want. They want meat. But our dogs are traditionally scavengers, so they ate fruit and vegetables that were left over on the ground and all that kind of thing. So it mimics the food, very much mimics what they would have got from their scavenging days.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I love too is that you're sourcing locally, that you're supporting Aussie growers and Aussie farmers. And it's just so important.
It is important. It is important. And what I'm particularly happy about, particularly proud of, is that, we're supporting Australian farmers in Australia, but we're also exporting. So we now export to Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, and somewhere else. And so the Australian farmers have got another way to get their produce exported.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense, because there now, I'm saying, you give me your not give me, obviously we pay for it. We buy what's called trim, which is 80% protein, 20% fat, and we get that and we use that in our food, which then gets sent overseas. Australian produce is being sent overseas in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before. So it supports Australian farmers, as said, in a way that they just simply wouldn't have been able to be supported before. And importantly, we use something called trim. So a free-range farmer is highly likely to be a paddock-to-plate farmer. So your intensive farmers, they grow the cattle or the sheep or whatever, and then they put them on the trucks and they get transported to the abattoir. And the farmer just waves them goodbye on the truck. Whereas a free range farmer deals with restaurants and supermarkets and delicatessens and so on. So they follow that whole journey. So they want to make the most of their animals. They want to use 100% of their animals. So they would sell their good cuts of meat, their eye fillets and T-bones and so on, to the restaurants. And then the bits of the meat that are left over, that have been trimmed from that's what we get. And they would have had to have what's called value added that. They would have had to make sausages or hamburgers or something out of that meat to be able to use that whole animal. Whereas we're saying you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Give us that, and we pay a good price for it. So there's so many ways that we support these farmers. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, I noticed that you've had a little bit of a refresh of your branding and your packaging lately. It looks beautiful.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's gone through. My background is actually in marketing. Packaging is all part of it. And it's just gone through a bit of a transition. And I think that the main thing about the packaging that has changed is that it shows the produce on the packaging, which we didn't do before. We didn't really show the produce. And that's what, immediately gets people's attention, that they can see the freeze-dried component at the end, and that they can see the meat that we actually use and the eggs that we use and so on. So it's a much better representation of the freshness of the food. Is exactly like homemade, so it's very fresh. And because we export to so many locations now, there's this collective opinion, sometimes in a bad way, about what they want to see on the packaging and
Yeah.
what their customers want to see. And Australia, particularly in the Asian countries, Australia is very, very highly thought of for our fresh produce, as is New Zealand. So it's a big selling point for Asian countries when they see the fresh produce on the packaging. So yes, I think it's looked good. It's evolved over time. It's very clear what the food is and what the ingredients are, and which are all just perfect.
Absolutely. And it's a nice clean design as well, which is going to work on retail shelves too.
Yeah, that's right. So as I said at the beginning, that we, because I'm a marketing person, I wanted to sell directly to the consumer because I wanted to know who the consumer was. And I had not been in the pet food industry before, so it was a new consumer group for me, and selling directly to people and dealing directly with people, you get to understand what their issues are, what their challenges were. Our biggest challenge is that we were freeze dried. Nobody knew what the hell that was. So we had so there was a great way of educating and informing people. But we're just now starting to look at retailing it as well. Because one of the big challenges that people have, and we all do it, that you run out of food or you're going to run out of food like tomorrow. And
And you
people
can't
call
wait for
and say,
shipping.
I can't get it to you that fast. So,
Yeah,
especially if you're in Western Australia. It's good to be able to now be in a position to be able to offer it, in stores. And so we're talking to lots of stores. Vets are very keen. We've already in quite a few vets because they're looking for an alternative for their customers as well. Yeah, it will. I believe it will stand alone in the stores. Definitely, it's got that. I like the contemporary look of it, and I personally like the realness of it. I think we spoke before this podcast about greenwashing especially in the pet space, where people can't believe what they're being told, and they shouldn't have. It's very level of skepticism, about what is actually in the food. So to be able to hopefully represent, this is it. What you see is what you get. Is
yeah,
that the only way you can do that is through the packaging. And believe
absolutely.
us, exactly what you see is exactly what.
Which is always refreshing. So, have you got anything in the works, on the cards, anything new, exciting that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, absolutely. We launched cat food about a year ago. So that's, that's obviously not new. That's a year ago, but we're just starting to really get some traction with that. The
Beautiful.
dog food was an easier entry. The cat food, because it's a new product for cats. So that's definitely, cats are notoriously bad water drinkers. Notoriously.
Yes, they are.
They are, and that's why they have so many urinary and kidney problems, because they don't drink enough water and they eat kibble, which is just terrible. So, this is great for cats because you add water back into it. So when the canapcus releases all the blood and the aromas of the meat, which is what the cats love, so it forces them to drink water. So please bear that, if your listeners can bear that in the mind, it's fantastic. For cats for that reason. But we've got another lot of new products that have just been launched, and they're boosters. And what they are is we still use the same freeze drying technique, but we've got three kinds. We've got an organ one, which contains organ meat, your livers, your kidneys, and so on. We've got a white one that's tripe and chai, and then we've got a green one, which
Ooh,
is your super greens.
super
And
greens.
so it's all broken up. They're in little cylinders, and it's all broken up into, so you just put a teaspoon of it on the food. So what I love about it is it kind of boosts the flavor of the food. If you want to use it on top of Frontier Pets, you don't need to add anything to Frontier Pets, but if you wanted to, that's great. But if you feed raw and you're not sure whether your pet's getting, a complete nutritional profile, which chances are they're not, because, people don't intuitively know what they should feed. It's not just meat, you got to feed other
That's
things,
right.
especially for dogs. Yeah, so these little boosters will, if you had a blob of mince and you put in the green, the white, and the red boosters, you've got pretty much a nutritionally complete meal. So that's just been launched, and it's going extremely well. And it's just a very, very simple way for people to boost their raw feeding. I mean, even boost their dry food if they were that way inclined, to give it
Absolutely.
that extra thing. And it's great for vegetarians that don't that like to feed their pets raw but don't want to handle raw product. Obviously, Frontier Pets
Yeah,
is great for that. And if they're happy enough to put a blob of meat in there, but they definitely don't want to be cutting up kidneys and livers, and I don't blame them, then
it's
that
not my
booster is
favourite
great.
activity.
It's just it's awful. So, so this is a great way to replace that kind of thing, and it just adds that little bit of extra oomph, for older dogs and puppies that need that extra bit. But it doesn't replace, as I said, it's not needed on Frontier Pets food, but it allows people that aren't necessarily feeding Frontier another way. But that's a recent thing, and that's fantastic. We're really delighted by how that is going.
And you've got those beautiful compostable and biodegradable cylinders as well.
Yes, that's right. Love to have it on our bags of food. Tried desperately to get
It's very
home
hard.
recycling.
It's
Can't do
very,
it.
very
Can't
hard, I
do
know.
it. Yeah, because it'll kill it. It'll oxidate it.
Yeah.
And we tried and tried and tried. It will happen. Someone will come up with it, but we
Yeah.
have to use foil.
The technology just hasn't quite caught up.
It's not
I'm
right.
in the same boat because I'm a plastic-free brand as well. I
Yes.
do use aluminium, which is infinitely recyclable, but
Mhm.
everything else is in similar packaging to the cylinders you use. It's the craft tubes. I can get away with the plant-based lining for my balms, but there are other certain products that I can't. You can get plant-based craft bags in smaller sizes, which we use for our smoothies, but they would not be anywhere big enough for an actual food product. And yeah, that nothing's 100% guarantee with something you need to keep dry. And it's when you're
Yeah.
going for a product like a food where it's not a once or twice off, where it's something you want to keep fresh for a number of months. Foil is really the best, unfortunately.
It is, and we do a lot of testing on, as I said, the food itself does not have any water in it. Doesn't have any water, but the bag itself can. I can't remember what the term is. Sorry, Sherry, but it's the absorption of water from the outside to the inside of the bag, and it can happen. It can just happen, and
Yeah.
so we've tested that to the
It
nth
will
degree
it
to
will
make
happen
sure.
sooner or later. Unfortunately, I mean, I can get
Yes.
away with it. I can get away with it for my products because you're either talking single-use skin and coat treatments, or you're talking smoothies, which yes, there might be a few servings in there, but they've generally used it up in a much shorter time frame, so it's fine. Yeah, with
Yeah.
freeze dry, different story,
Yeah,
but it
it
will
is,
get there.
and we just keep looking and talking to people. And Australia isn't good in terms of manufacturing packaging. You have to go overseas to
No, we're a bit
get
behind.
packaging. So we are, but we don't, because we don't have the manufacturing infrastructure anymore. So
Yeah,
let's not go down that horrible pathway. But yeah, we will eventually. But
yeah.
it
Yeah,
is
no,
what it is.
it all takes time. I mean, look, I'm still ordering some of my packaging from China because it's just not available in Australia, or Australia will only have
Right.
one size and I need a different size, which is painful, but it's temporary. It will improve.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've just got to wait and see. There's enough. It's consumer demand. When there's enough people saying got to do this, then it will change. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. But the good news is about Frontier Pets is that it's got a best before, not a use by, but a best before of 2 years, which has been clinically trialled.
That's
It
terrific.
will stay for years. Yeah.
Oh, that's huge. Thank you so
Mm.
much for coming. I have thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and there is just so
Good.
many nuggets in there for people.
Good. Good. Pleased that you asked me. Thank you very much, Sherry.
My pleasure, and I'd love to have you back again sometime. I think we could probably talk for days.
Yep, absolutely. Fantastic. Happy to talk about Frontier Pets anytime.
Thanks for tuning in for the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Say hi to your dog for me.